Hi everyone, welcome back to another SimplePlanes video. In this video, I'm going to explain some SWL 120 progress updates, and I'm also going to work on coding the windshield wipers. I'm also going to give you a tour of the SWL 120 in virtual reality, because I have that now. So, let's get started. I don't know why I keep saying this on my videos, but since my last video, I've made quite a bit of progress on the center panel. I've also made some progress on the overhead panel as well, but I'm going to look at that later. I've explained what the RMCs, or radio management computers, are in my last video. Well, not my last video, but like my last SimplePlanes video. So I'm not going to explain these. I'm just going to explain what's been added since that video. So I highly recommend you go and watch that video if you haven't already. So since that video, I've added this trim indicator here, and I've also added all of the radio controls, as well as rearranging the cabin controls. It's not done yet, like I haven't even touched the FMC since my last video, but at least I've done something. So basically, from the RMC there's all of these different frequencies, and I've added in some controls for the captain's headset, the first officer's headset, and the cockpit speakers. These three panels are identical in terms of actual function. They just control a different, I guess, audio source. Say I tune in, some random frequency for the VHF. If I were to click on that frequency number on the captain's headset and the cockpit speakers, and I guess the first officer's headset as well, the exact same sound, or whatever's coming out of that frequency in the VHF, would be playing identically on all of those three speakers or something. I guess it's just something I added to have some more realism and just fill up some space here. The cabin controls have been rearranged as well. Previously they were it was a different outline than what I have for everything. It was white, it had, I'll talk about the screws now I guess. I decided to, instead of having these hemisphere things for, I guess what I was trying to call screw heads, I instead opted for a more realistic design which had the Phillips or plus drive on a fuselage, which is pretty simple, just two parts instead of one. It's a label on a fuselage. They're also randomly rotated for every single panel which has them, just to add some more realism. The actual controls on the cabin panel are the same ones carried over from the previous panel of cabin controls, except there's now an evacuation command switch with a safety cover. This doesn't actually do anything in SimplePlanes, but it's just something I added. Actually, I might do something in the variables, but I think it just does nothing. It definitely does something in real life, but in SimplePlanes it's just a cover with a switch. There's also a phone back here. Now this has been resized a lot of times. I think it was on my last video, the last SimplePlanes video about this cockpit. I've just resized it a bit to make it look better for virtual reality, because I found a lot of things were off, the scaling in virtual reality. I'm not sure why. I think it's because what I can see on a computer screen is different to what I see in virtual reality. The last new feature on the center panel is this trim indicator. Can't get a good view. I guess there's this one. It's pretty simple in terms of explaining how it works. It was quite complicated to code, but in terms of actual function, it's pretty simple. You just have a green line, which indicates where the trim is. This is in degrees too. I haven't actually got the trim coded into the actual plane. It's just here in the cockpit as of now. There's also a button here where you can reset the trim. I don't think that'll exist in real life, but I just added it for SimplePlanes purposes. That just about wraps up the center panel. I know I said I'd be working on the flight management computer, or FMC, this thing here, in my last SimplePlanes video, but that'll be in my next video, I think. I keep saying I'll do things in my next videos and never do them. So the overhead panel has not really been completely redesigned, but I've resized or added and removed some controls to make it more realistic and virtual reality compatible. The basic changes are the landing lights have been moved from this panel here to this panel here, and they've also been redesigned to be like actual landing light switches instead of just normal switches. I've rearranged the engine dials to be bigger for virtual reality because the previous ones were absolutely tiny. And I've also incorporated the APU in there because again in virtual reality it was like impossible to turn it on because I couldn't actually click the start button in virtual reality because the switch was in the way. You also notice there's the new screws on all these panels. So I replaced the landing light panel here with anti-ice controls. Aside from just indicating a light, these do absolutely nothing in SimplePlanes, but of course they would remove icing on the wings and engines and other surfaces in real life. I think the exterior lights have changed a bit. Yeah, they have changed a bit. I can't really tell you exactly what's been changed, but I've just added a few new lights, and I've also changed the existing ones to like match what's in real life. There's also the wiper controls now. That's what I'm going to be coding in this video. So I have left and right, and you can just change them to like int to low high, so that's intermittent, not int. And then for the right wiper, on the 787 reference picture I used, obviously the overhead panel is a little different. Both the left and right wiper dials had the settings on the right side. So this one would actually have off, intermittent, low and high instead of what it has on the left side. I decided against that for mine because I had no space. So I have this. There's also been a few other small back-end changes, nothing I can actually think of right now or really show, but I've been doing a lot of coding in the background in terms of variables. And as of now, every single switch you can see here does have a function, like it does work fully, aside from the wiper dials, because actually I guess they technically do function, but there's no wipers right now to code, so they don't really control the device that it's displayed. Am I even making sense again? Anyway, so back to the APU, which was... No, I need fuel first. There we go. It's pretty self-explanatory. You turn this to start, and it starts, and then when it reaches, I don't know, the number 6, then it's fully started. This will go to on automatically. Similar process for engine 1 and engine 2. And there's no engines in this file right now, but all the engine variables are in fact working in the background. The engines just like display these variables. I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but really all the engines do, aside from like being engines, they don't actually produce any variables themselves. They just use variables which work without the engines to like look like engines. Yeah, that does not make sense at all. Anyway, that's really it for the overhead panel as well. So now, let's code these wipers. Now the wipers are currently in the main file. They're here, and all they do right now is work with Activate 2, and they just oscillate back and forth. I'll just show you. So yep, all they do with Activate 2 is they just go back and forwards. Now if this was on my new dials, I think this would be the low setting. Or it might be a little faster. Yeah, I have like some function coded in, but want them to work with the dial now instead of just Activate 2. Okay, so I've gone ahead and moved the wipers onto the overhead panel. So what I want to do now is I want to have 3 different codes for intermittent, low and high, which output for intermittent a number which goes between 0 and 1 intermittently. For low, I've pretty much got that coded here. I just need to modify it to work with the dial. And for high, I want for like this code but just a little faster. Starting with intermittent, I'm just going to do some quick testing. So I want to go from 0 to 1 and then back to 0. And then I want it to stay at 0 for some time before repeating the cycle. I think the way I can do this is with
a few minutes later.
This is how the low function would work. Well, we're trying to do ping pong here. What? Not ping pong, in a minute. Trying to do in a minute here. So what I think I need to do is I need to make this number go larger than 1, except when it's larger than 1 it's clamped to be at 1 or 0. Oh yeah, I forgot to clamp a 1 the activate 3, because the activate 3 is a boolean, which means when converted to a number it's -1 or 1. Clamp a 1 just makes it 0 or 1. There we go. When it's off, nothing happens. It's still a low function, not the intermittent function. I'm not quite sure how long it takes for intermittent wipers. I guess there's like different types of wipers, but I'm not sure how long it actually should take them to, like, not how long it should take them, but I'm not sure how long they shouldn't move for. I'm going to try 3/4 of that time, so 3/4 of the time in a single loop. They should not be moving, at least for mine. So I'm just writing some code around that initial ping pong to make it so 3/4 of the time it will read 0. So first I clamp it between 0.75 and 1. So when it's less than 0.75, it's staying at 0.75. Then I'm going to subtract. Yeah. So this minus 0.75. So by subtracting that, I now have some code which outputs 0 or 0.25. So like it goes from 0 to 0.25, and then I'm going to times that by. I'm just gonna put some brackets around that. I'm going to times it by. I'll just test this code. You can see here it does that. However, it goes too fast, so I'm going to. What am I going to do here? What happens if I get the sum and I divide that by 4? So by dividing it by 4 after the initial sum activate 3, whenever the intermittent ping pong does like ping pong up between 0 and 0.25, it does it at the same rate as the low setting. Now I just need to scale this up to be 0 and 1, not 0 and 0.25. I think that would mean like timesing it by 4. Let's try that. That looks about right. So that is our intermittent code, which is just one of the 3. Our low function code is already there, so it's really just the ping pong by itself, without that divided by 4. And that's actually this code here. So that's our low code, and that is our intermittent code at the end here. Now for the high code. It's basically the low code, but with a higher sum rate, if that even makes sense. It's basically a sum of the clamper 1 activate 3, except I'm going to add in a multiplier by 2 to double the speed. That seems a bit too fast, but we'll see how it looks in the wipers in practice. So now we have our 3 codes. Now I need to get them to work with our dial. I'm going to start with the left wiper dial. I think the variable which tells me just what the value is the wipe dial. What is it? Let me just check. Just checked, and it's actually L wiper dial. And that is 0 when it's off, 1 when it's intermittent, 2 when it's low, and 3 when it's high. We can use this to control our codes. So this function of this is our high function. I'm going to use what I call a stacked multi-selector code. So first of all, L wiper dial equals 0. If it's 0, then we output 0. If it's not 0, then this is where the stack part of that multi-selector comes in. There's no such function as a stacked multi-selector function, but what I'm doing here is I'm using a bunch of like tertiary operators where you have a boolean, and then if that's true then output A, if it's false then B. I just use it a bunch of times to have like a sort of like a if this then do this, if that's not true then do this logic or something. Again, I'm probably not making sense. Right, so we have that. Then we have our other L wiper dial. 1. If it's 1, then do... I'm just going to leave this blank for int function. That's not the final code. If it's not 1, then try the second last logic. If it is 2, then do I'm just gonna put low for now. And finally, if that's not true, then do the high function. Just gonna copy this. This is the intermittent function. I'm just going to copy my intermittent function here. Put that there. Get rid of the other bit. And now I just need to grab my low function code. This is my low function code. So I'm going to grab that and place that in the placeholder text here. Then I can get rid of that end bit. And there we go. So when the wiper dial is selected to high, then we have our high code. If it's low, then we have the low code. If it's intermittent, then we have our intermittent code. There we go. And if it's off, then it's off. Now let's place this code. Where is it here? Into the L wiper variable. So this wiper here uses a variable. I used a variable instead of putting the code directly into the rotators to just make my life easier when I was trying to modify code. So I'll just put this code in the L wiper variable. I'm also going to have to reload this file. Actually, I don't have to. I can just put it in variables. There it is. So instead of my placeholder code, I'm just going to put in the final code. Then I'm going to see how that runs. I just realized my code uses activate 3, but I can just turn that on and test it. So off, nothing. If it's intermittent, then it should. That's the right wiper, but anyway, we can fix that. So intermittent looks about right. Low seems right. And high seems right as well. Although, it seems to be going a little too fast. Like, not like going too fast, but I added some damper multiplier to the rotator. And because of how damper multiplier works, the rotator is not actually using its full range of movement. So if you can look at this one here, it's rotating more than this one is. So this one ends around here. Let's try to get to this one. Except this one goes down compared to this one to almost 90 degrees. I'm trying to explain this in a way that you can understand. So basically, I need to fix that damper multiplier for this one. The problem with doing that is then the wiper will cause the entire plane to wobble. So let's fix those two things. And also, this is technically the left wiper because of where I took it off the plane, because this side here is technically the left side of the plane, or whatever this is. I guess it's like a cockpit. This is the right wiper. That's why that is. So what I'll do is I'll just change the code this reads from L wiper to right wiper. I'll put in a damper multiplier of, I'll just try 50. The problem is it just causes the plane to wobble if something like oscillates too fast and it has no damper multiplier. While I'm here, I can also change the activate 3 to, I think, what will I actually choose? I think I will change that to 1. So I'll just do some 2 here, because the activate 3 is for testing. So I'll change all of this to 1. And here, instead of doing 1 divided by 4, I can change that to 0.25. There we go. Where did this go wrong? Right. Somewhere in here there's a clamp which doesn't have all the arguments it needs. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 2, 1, opening brackets. Right. Ah, I see here. what I'll do is I will, instead of trying to fix it there, I'll just put it into Notepad++, and use the useful feature where it shows you brackets to figure out where the missing bracket is. Here it is. Clamp, ping pong. I think I fixed that. Let's try this. Nope. Found it. I can just move that. Yeah, I'll move that. Let's try this one. That worked. Right, let's see, there we go. Looks like it's working. Now the only issue is it seems to be making my cockpit here wobble, which is noticeable when you put it to high, and that is really bad. This requires tweaking the damper multiplier and also making sure the wiper can still oscillate to almost its full range of motion on the high setting. But ignoring that, our actual code seems to work fine. Aside from the bit where it jumps, we can fix that with the smooth. Again, a lot of smoothing and coding in here. So just smooth all of that by 1. Intermittent. There we go. Low. I haven't done the damper multiplier yet. Right. So if I change it from low to intermittent, instead of just jumping back to 0, I'll just find a good example. It will slowly go at the rate of like a low setting back to 0, instead of just jumping right to it. Maybe a damper multiplier of 1000. My intermittent, let's see how that goes. Fine, low, fine, and high. What is this? That's not working. That is not. Actually, the reason it's doing that is because of our smooth here. Where is it? Here. So let's fix. Actually, don't need to do anything. I'm just gonna try 2 for that. It's kind of worse. Like it does the range of motion I wanted, but it's hard to notice. You can sort of see it here. I'll just try. You can see it here. It bumps the, I guess, test bench or something back and forth when it rotates. You can also get rid of all of these codes up here. Let's try more damper multiplier. And no, it's fixed the oscillating, like bumping issue. However, now the wiper isn't going through its full range of motion. Let's try 3000. I'm also going to write a small bit of code, which pretty much, if the wiper dial is, what? I just typed that. Equals 1. No, not 1. Alright, if it's, but if it's 3, then have 2. Otherwise, have 1 for that smooth. That way, it has that smooth of the whole code. 1 for that transition from low to intermittent, and then when it's in high, it changes the smooth to a 2 to allow for the higher speed of the high setting to actually work instead of just having that middle range back and forth. That seems to be okay, and there's no noticeable bumping. That might change if I put this code on the wiper on the plane instead of on here, but I think this is working. Now all I need to do is just copy that left wiper code to the right wiper and change it to the right wiper dial. I can also, while I'm here, make this work with electrics. If it's 0, do nothing. Otherwise, that's how this code works, run everything else. Same for the left wiper. Electrics, if it's 0, then output 0. If it's anything other than 0, output that code. So you can see here, I've set them both to high and nothing's happening. But if we turn on the electrics, then there we go. I think that works pretty well. And that's it for this coding section. Just before the virtual reality gameplay, I want to point out a few things. First, the microphone in my virtual reality headset is very high quality compared to my headset microphone. The second thing is I forgot to move my mouse cursor off the screen, so the entirety of this clip has a mouse cursor on it in the top left corner, sorry about that. And the third thing is it's hard to tell what my monitor's going to see versus what I see in virtual reality. So some clips, what I'm trying to show is either just off the screen, or it's not in the center of the screen because I was looking in the wrong direction. Again, I'm sorry about that, I'm still learning how to make videos in virtual reality. So here we are in virtual reality. This probably looks the same to you, but for me it looks like real life but virtual. That's why it's called virtual reality. And so part of the reason I wanted to redo the overhead panel was to make the overhead panel, and I guess the plane as well, more virtual reality friendly, so I can actually fly this thing entirely in virtual reality. One of the main issues I was having is the APU starter switch. Like the old version of the APU starter system had a switch like this one, and a button right in front of the switch. And that was fine in non-VR, but when I wanted to interact with that switch and button in virtual reality, I couldn't actually click the button, so I could do things like turn the switch on and off. But whenever I tried to click on that button, I kept hitting the switch. That's because they have the hitboxes work. So I changed that to be a dial, which is pretty good now. You can't actually turn the dial with the virtual reality hand, just because I wanted to make it both normal SimplePlanes friendly and virtual reality friendly. So you can still just move your finger to wherever the button is and click that. So it's still somewhat realistic. And also, these dials are pretty small. Now I'm saying that because the old dials were much smaller. So think of one of these buttons, but circle, and that was what the dials were like. Which is very small, and it was like almost impossible to click the buttons to move the dial. This is the size it should be in real life, like this dial here. And I thought this is actually quite big, but obviously it's not, because it's the right size for virtual reality. Which also means these dials here are quite small. It's hard to really see the size for you, but for me it's pretty small. Like this is my hand, and you can sort of see it here. And that's all of those 3 dials, but they're just like the width of my hand. So it's pretty small. And no, the wipers aren't that small. That's because they got scaled down from the giant size I was working on this overhead panel in. The real ones are like, I don't know, this long. There's really not much else to explain about this. I'll just show you the other issue I've been having with the throttle quadrant. There's no throttle quadrant here. And now we have a throttle quadrant. Now this actually looks somewhat small. I think it's about the right size for real life. It just looks a little off in virtual reality. I do know this could be a little bigger. And also, when I was building this, I did put in grips, so I could actually click and drag with my mouse. And these sort of work in virtual reality. Sometimes, like this one, they're just a little off with the rotation. I tried to look at this, but the shown hand in the editor looks like this, so I'm not quite sure what's off here. The main issue is when I tried to use the throttles. Like, it worked there, but I was trying to grab the right throttle. Actually, I think I must have changed this. But the old version had a grip for the left throttle, about here. Then it had a switch for normal, like, throttle, just like the throttle input, which I'm using as with my joystick. You can see here. That was a small lever out here, and also there's a second lever there. And then there's the right throttle grip here. I changed this now to be throughout the entire handles because I'm going to implement a solution which I'm going to talk about in my next video for this throttle issue, where you can grab both and it really moves both. I'm going to explain that in my next video. But basically, it was really difficult, and sort of still is, to grab the right grip you're trying to get. Like if I try and grab the right grip, it sort of works now, but it was like a nightmare in the old version. Sort of still is. And also the other thing I noticed is these reverse thrust levers, they are a second lever on top of the main throttle lever, except look, let me just grab this one. If I grab this one, and I try to move it, I actually end up moving the throttle as well. I can sort of move it by itself, but it still somewhat moves the throttle as well. It's also a little bit difficult to try and grab the right lever you're trying to grab. I mean, it's doable, but it's pretty difficult. The rest of the scaling is a little bit okay. These switches are pretty small, so is this safety cover and switch. I can also use the switch through the safety cover, but anyway. That phone, it looks huge in the editor, but it's about the right size virtual reality. Yeah, the scaling it's hard to get the scaling, especially for the finer details, correct, but it requires a lot of testing and trial and error. Let me just turn on, there it is. I'm just going to turn on the functions. So yeah, everything else is usable. These buttons are the right scale for real life. It's a little bit difficult to try and type stuff, but it's doable for sure. Everything seems about right. That trim issue, that's going to be an issue because I can't really move it, so I'm going to have to look into that. I'm pretty sure it's an issue with how the control base reads inputs. So I think I might have to look into that, changing those switch sizes, because that's too small. But other than that, everything else is about the right scaling. Especially in virtual reality, this trim reset button is very useful, even though it's not in real life, and this is basically real life, but in SimplePlanes. And lastly, here we are in currently it's called the SWL 120 fuselage-mods, because it's the fuselage version with mods. But eventually this will become just the SWL 120 fuselage. The scaling is, well, it's sort of okay. The ceiling is a little low, and there's the sun there for some reason. But most of this is about the right scaling. What I find for what I find for moving in this file is put my virtual reality hand on the floor, and then I try to get it so the SimplePlanes floor matches the actual floor. That's about right. And you can see here I'm almost at the ceiling, so that scaling's an issue there. This tap here is really small, so is the sink, as well as this thing, whatever this is called here. Here's my hand. You can see it morphing through the tap. Way too small. I'm not going to fix that because I've spent too long working on this interior, and it's kind of hard to change that. The latches are about the right scale, so are the doors. The galley cart's a bit of the... Can't keep hitting stuff in real life. What? What did I just do? Oh, I have no idea what just happened there. How did that happen? The cart's somehow on an angle. Can I even fix this? I have no idea what I just did, but anyway. I'll try and finish the video with this. Yeah, I have no idea what's off here, because the seatbelts and passenger signs shouldn't be wonky like that. That's never happened in here before, but anyway. So the general interior feel of the 120 is... it's about... everything's scaled correctly, everything is at the same scale, but it's a little bit small, if you get what I'm saying. Here we have an economy seat, and it's about probably 1.5 feet across. It just looks too small to me, yeah, it's too small. Kinda hard to really see, but yeah, it's just too small. I don't know how I got the scaling wrong though, because I built this really to scale. This seat, in SimplePlanes, on the seats that are actually part of the game, there's a seat which you can drag out, and when you select that seat, it shows it's not really describe, but it's a person, and that person in that base seat is about the right size for one of these seats, except these seats are too small in virtual reality, and also that is no leg room. You can barely fit a leg in there, what? Too small. At least I'll be able to fix the scaling on my next plane, because I have virtual reality from the beginning for my next plane. But other than the scaling issue, the interior looks about right. Door handles are the right size. Might really show it else to explain. And also the way I'm moving is I have my hands like together, like my controls are together. Then I use growth grips, and then I just move around my hands. Really useful for moving the camera around. The cargo door controls are the right size. Hang on, let me just turn on hydraulics. There we go. There, but at the right size. The cargo door could be a little bigger. Like this, the scaling's just a tiny bit small. It could just be a scaling issue. Again, I keep saying scaling issue. But really the same thing. Everything is the same scale, but that scale is a little bit small. But anyway, with that is the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you in my next video. Bye!